This rescued bear cub is a natural-born comedian. Try not to smile at her goofy antics. A warm spring afternoon bathed the suburbs of Asheville, North Carolina, in a golden glow. The air was rich with the sweet fragrance of blooming dogwoods, and the cheerful chirping of birds returning from their winter journeys echoed through the trees. 12-year-old Logan Jenkins, a tall and lanky boy with curious eyes and a mop of unruly brown hair, had wandered deeper into the woods behind his backyard than usual. His parents had often warned him not to stray too far into the forest, but that day something felt different. It was as if the woods were calling him, drawing him in with the sense that something important was about to happen. He parted a thick tangle of wild raspberry bushes and suddenly froze. First, he heard it, a soft, pitiful whimper that tugged at his heart. Following the sound, Logan stepped into a small clearing and saw a heartbreaking sight. A black bear cub, no bigger than a medium-sized dog, caught in a cruel iron snare. The trap had clamped tightly around one of its front paws, and the frightened animal thrashed in panic, eyes wide with fear. "Hey there," Logan whispered gently, kneeling at a safe distance. The cub turned to face him, baring its tiny teeth in a desperate attempt to appear threatening. But the fear in its eyes betrayed its bravado. The poor thing was thin, probably separated from its mother for some time, and now trapped in a device it couldn't escape. Logan remembered his science teacher warning the class that wild animals, even young ones, were unpredictable when scared. But he couldn't walk away, not when something was suffering right in front of him. So he sat cross-legged on the forest floor, a few yards from the cub, and began softly singing a nursery rhyme his mother used to sing to him. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." The gentle tune floated on the breeze, and slowly the cub's frantic movements began to calm. Its eyes stayed fixed on Logan, still fearful, but now laced with curiosity. "I'm going to help you," Logan said between verses, his voice steady even as his heart pounded. "But I need my dad for that." Moving slowly, Logan pulled out his phone and texted, "Dad, I need you in the woods behind our house. Follow the path past the big oak. Please come alone. It's an emergency." Jack Jenkins was in the middle of fixing a loose kitchen cabinet when his phone buzzed. Reading Logan's message, a chill ran down his spine. Ever since his wife's passing 3 years ago, Jack had been especially protective of Logan. The thought of his son alone in the woods with an emergency sent him racing out the back door, grabbing his tool belt, which held a multi-tool, just in case. He found the oak tree Logan had mentioned and hurried down the path, calling out softly, "Logan? Over here, Dad." Jack pushed through the brush and came to a halt. There was his son sitting calmly on the forest floor, singing, and just feet away, a bear cub caught in a trap. "Logan," Jack hissed, fighting the urge to yank his son away. "Get back. Now." Logan looked up, meeting his father's alarmed gaze. "Dad, he's hurt. We have to help him." "That's a wild bear, Logan. Even a cub can be dangerous. We need to call the animal control." "They'll take too long," Logan argued. "Look at his leg. The trap is cutting into it. He's scared and hungry." Jack ran a hand through his graying hair, torn between the danger and the raw suffering before him. The cub had stopped struggling and now watched both of them with wide, pain-filled eyes. "Please," Logan said quietly. Something in his voice pushed past Jack's fear. "All right," Jack said at last, "but you stay back while I work on the trap, and if the mother shows up, we run. No arguments." The trap was a brutal, spring-loaded device, the kind often used by poachers. Jack's blood boiled at the cruelty. "I've got honey in my backpack," Logan said suddenly. "Maybe we can use it to distract him." Jack nodded. "Good thinking. Set it just out of reach, then step back." Logan opened his pack, retrieved a small jar of honey, and placed it a few feet from the cub. The aroma immediately caught the bear's attention, its nose twitching eagerly. While the cub sniffed the air, Jack crept forward, multi-tool in hand. The bear flinched as he neared, but its hunger kept it focused on the honey. Carefully, Jack worked the mechanism loose. "There we go," he muttered as the trap sprang open. The cub paused, glanced at Jack, then lunged forward, not to flee but to dive into the honey. It knocked over the tin and began licking the golden treat straight from the ground. "What do we do now?" Logan asked, watching the cub devour the sticky mess. "We can't leave him. His legs hurt. He's all alone." "I'll call the Wildlife Rescue Center," Jack said, already dialing. But every call ended the same. They were either underfunded, at capacity, or unwilling to take in a bear cub. The excuses piled up: no proper facilities, liability concerns, fear of habituated adult bears. Meanwhile, the cub tried to stand, only to collapse with a cry that made Logan flinch. "No one's going to take him." "Are they?" Jack shook his head. "Not yet. They're all hesitant." Tears welled in Logan's eyes. "We can't leave him, Dad. He'll die." Jack looked from his son to the cub. Logan's pleading expression was the same one he'd used when they rescued Max, their golden retriever. But a bear wasn't a dog. This was wild, dangerous, and definitely illegal. Yet as the cub licked honey from its paws, eyes full of trust, Jack's resolve cracked. "Just until his leg heals," he finally said. "And only if we can find a vet to look at him. Then we find a sanctuary. Understood?" Logan's face lit up with a rare smile. "I understand. Thank you, Dad. I'll call him Buddy." "Don't name him," Jack groaned. But it was already too late. Bringing Buddy home proved to be more complicated than expected. The cub was far too heavy for Logan to carry, and though Jack was strong enough, he hesitated to pick up a wild animal, even one that was injured and young. Thinking fast, they improvised a makeshift stretcher using Jack's jacket and a sturdy fallen branch. Logan smeared the last bits of honey onto the fabric to coax Buddy onto it. The bear, still licking sticky sweetness from his snout, obediently crawled onto the jacket. Together, father and son carried their unusual passenger through the woods, moving carefully along the winding trail toward home. Jack couldn't shake the absurdity of the situation. A structural engineer and widowed father smuggling a bear cub through the suburbs. If any neighbors saw them, they'd think he'd completely lost his mind. Fortunately, their house sat at the far edge of the development. The forest bordered one side, and their closest neighbors were a good distance away. They entered through the side yard and quietly slipped Buddy into their detached garage, which had a small storage room Jack had always intended to turn into a workshop. That plan would have to wait. It would now serve as Buddy's temporary home. "We need to make this place comfortable for him," Logan said, spreading an old blanket in the corner of the room. "And we need to get his leg checked out." Jack nodded, already forming a mental list of what supplies they'd need and who they might be able to call for help. One name came to mind: Mary Ann Wilson, a local vet who had once helped them nurse an injured hawk back to health. "She might be able to help us," Jack said aloud. Discreetly. Logan's face lit up. "Mary Ann, she's awesome. She'll help Buddy, I know she will." Mary Ann arrived that evening, her face full of concern as Jack explained the story. She listened without judgment, then followed them into the garage to examine their unusual guest. After a careful inspection, with Buddy sedated, she looked up. "He's malnourished and dehydrated. That leg has a nasty wound from the trap, but fortunately no bones are broken. With regular care, it should heal well." Jack breathed a quiet sigh of relief. "So, we can release him soon?" Marianne's expression grew serious. "That's the hard part. He's just a few months old. At this age, he should still be with his mother, learning how to survive in the wild. Without those lessons, release might be risky." "So what do we do?" Logan asked softly. "In an ideal world, he'd go to a specialized wildlife rehab center," Marianne said. "But I understand you've tried. If you decide to keep him temporarily, you must remember, do not treat him like a pet. Let him live as naturally as possible. He's a wild animal. Keep him that way." She left them with antibiotics, painkillers, and a long list of instructions, and a promise to check in. The next morning, Jack reinforced the storage room, adding a lock to the door and ensuring it was safe for both Buddy and themselves. Logan dove into research, filling a notebook with information about bear diets, habits, and care. Under their care, Buddy's health improved rapidly. His leg began to heal, and with daily meals, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and the occasional fish from the local market, he gained strength and weight, and with his recovery came his personality. Buddy turned out to be playful and curious, with a goofy streak that made him seem more like a mischievous toddler than a wild animal. He would roll onto his back, swat at hanging cords, chase his tail, and nibble at Logan's shoelaces. One moment he was cautious and shy. The next, he was tumbling over himself in excitement. Logan spent hours sitting in the storage room, reading aloud or simply chatting to Buddy as if he were just another member of the household. Jack kept his distance at first, wary of how close Logan was getting, emotionally and physically, to the bear. But he couldn't deny the change in his son. Logan was smiling more, laughing again. The cloud that had hung over him since his mother's death seemed to be lifting. About 2 weeks later, Logan approached his father with determination on his face. "Dad, Buddy needs more space. He's healing, and that little room isn't enough anymore." Jack looked up from his laptop, where he had just finished his latest email, to yet another wildlife sanctuary. Another "sorry, we can't take him" response. "We can't just let a bear roam the house, Logan." "Not the house," Logan replied. "The backyard. It's fenced. It's private. We could bear-proof it and supervise him." Jack considered it. Their backyard was big, enclosed on 3 sides with tall privacy fencing and backed into the woods. With a few modifications, it might work. "All right," he said, "but we'll need to reinforce the fence, and someone has to be with him at all times." Logan broke into a grin. "Thanks, Dad. Buddy's gonna love it." They spent the weekend turning their backyard into a makeshift bear haven, raising the fence height, burying mesh beneath it to prevent digging, and building climbing structures and a kiddie pool. When they finally let Buddy out, his reaction was priceless. He bounded across the grass, tumbling with excitement, sniffing every plant, and eventually belly flopping into the pool, splashing water everywhere. Logan and Jack watched, soaked and laughing, as the cub played like he'd never known such joy. Spring turned to early summer, and their unusual family adapted. Buddy split his time between his den and supervised backyard excursions. Jack kept searching for a permanent home, though his urgency faded as Buddy settled in. That's when they discovered Buddy's most surprising quirk. One afternoon, Logan was watching cartoons when Buddy wandered in from the garage, drawn by the colorful sounds of animation. The bear sat down in front of the screen, tilting his head, fascinated. When Jack came in and saw a bear hypnotized by Bugs Bunny, he stared in disbelief. "Logan," he said slowly, "why is there a bear watching Looney Tunes in our living room?" Logan shrugged. He likes cartoons. From that day on, Cartoon Hour became a daily tradition. Buddy would sit, eyes glued to the screen, sometimes trying to reach behind the TV to find the animals. His confusion when he couldn't was enough to send Logan and Jack into fits of laughter. If cartoons were Buddy's favorite pastime, the kitchen quickly became his favorite stage. Jack had always loved turning cooking into a performance, something he used to do to make his late wife laugh, and later to cheer up Logan. He'd sing silly songs, bang pots like drums, and twirl spatulas like batons. But with Buddy now in the mix, the performances went to a whole new level of absurd. Buddy would leap onto the kitchen table, despite Jack's half-hearted protests, rise up on his hind legs, and mimic Jack's every exaggerated move. He'd sway his head, raise his paws like he was conducting an orchestra, or tap on nearby pans with comedic timing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jack announced dramatically one evening, holding a wooden spoon like a microphone, "presenting the one, the only, the spectacular Buddy Bear." On cue, Buddy rose onto his hind legs, tilted his head, and began to sway, looking so serious that Logan collapsed in laughter. Soon, the kitchen wasn't just for meals. It was a nightly comedy show starring Jack and Buddy, with Logan as the audience. Sometimes Buddy would knock over a bowl or send a spoon flying, but no one minded. The room, once heavy with silence after Logan's mother passed, now rang with laughter. Buddy's curiosity knew no boundaries. Jack discovered this the hard way one morning when he stumbled sleepily into the bathroom, only to find a bear already inside. Buddy had figured out how to open the bathroom door and developed a bizarre habit of climbing onto the toilet seat and sitting solemnly, watching Jack's morning routine through the mirror. "Buddy," Jack grimly said, "privacy, please." The bear tilted his head, clearly baffled by the request. The situation reached peak absurdity when Jack reached for the toilet paper, and Buddy snatched the entire roll and bolted down the hallway. Jack yelled after him, and moments later Logan came running, only to find his father chasing a bear wrapped in a trail of tissue paper. "Your bear," Jack gasped, cornering Buddy by the sofa. "Needs etiquette lessons." "Sorry, Dad," Logan said through giggles. "I think he thinks it's a game." Buddy's antics were undeniably hilarious, but they weren't the only thing that made him special. One afternoon, Logan was sprawled on the couch, playing superhero and pretending to faint dramatically. Buddy, who'd been dozing nearby, suddenly jolted awake. With a look of panic in his eyes, he rushed to Logan's side. He gently patted Logan's face with his paw. Then, to Jack's amazement, Buddy rummaged through a nearby basket, pulled out a small first aid kit, and dragged it to the boy's side. He thumped Logan's chest with his paw, wearing the most serious expression Jack had ever seen on a bear. Logan burst into laughter. "Buddy thought I was actually hurt." From that day on, Buddy became more than just a source of comic relief. He became a comfort. When Logan had nightmares and woke up crying, Buddy would appear at his bedside, climb up, and gently wrap his front legs around the boy like a hug. When Jack had a tough day and sat on the couch in silence, Buddy would quietly rest his head on Jack's knee. They were becoming a family, a very unusual, incredibly mismatched family, but a family all the same. As summer deepened, Buddy grew. No longer the scrawny cub they had rescued, he had become robust and sleek, his black fur glossy under the sun. His injured leg had healed fully, though it left behind a faint scar, a quiet reminder of their first meeting in the woods. Jack knew the day was coming when they'd have to face the question they had been avoiding. What was Buddy's future? "Do we really have to find somewhere else for him?" Logan asked one evening as they watched Buddy playing with a large ball in the backyard. Jack sighed. "He's a wild animal, Logan. He's going to keep growing. He'll be a full-sized black bear. We have to think about what's best for him." "But he's happy here," Logan said quietly, "and he makes us happy." Before Jack could answer, a car door slammed out front. Then, voices. Jack immediately stiffened. "Take Buddy inside," he said urgently. Logan rushed to the garage, guiding Buddy inside and locking the door. At the front door stood two officials from the local conservation agency. Their expressions were stern. "We've received reports of a bear being kept on this property," one of them said. "I'm sure you know it's illegal to keep a wild animal without the proper permits." Jack's stomach dropped. Somehow someone had seen Buddy, probably when he'd been in the backyard. He considered denying it, but decided to tell the truth. "My son found a bear cub caught in an illegal trap," Jack began. "He was injured and alone. We called every rescue and wildlife agency we could find. No one would take him. We didn't plan to keep him this long. We just couldn't leave him to die." The officers exchanged glances, their faces softening slightly. "We'd like to see the animal," the older officer said. Jack led them around the house and called for Logan. Reluctantly, Logan brought Buddy out. The bear lumbered forward and pressed himself gently against Logan's side. "He's remarkably tame," the younger officer observed. "That's part of the problem," Jack said. "He's too used to people now. And his injured leg, it never fully recovered. He can't climb well. Releasing him would be dangerous." The older officer crouched slightly, keeping a respectful distance. "How long have you had him?" "Almost 3 months," Logan answered softly. "And you've been trying to find him a permanent placement?" Jack nodded. "I've got documentation, every call and email we sent." They examined Buddy's living quarters, the modifications Jack had made, and the effort put into his care. Buddy sniffed them politely, then returned to Logan's side, calm and composed. "This is not a standard case," the older officer admitted after a long pause. The conservation officers stood in thoughtful silence for a long moment, glancing between Buddy, Logan, and Jack. Finally, the senior officer spoke. "Normally, we'd be required to remove the animal immediately," he said. "But it's clear this situation isn't normal." Logan's eyes flickered with hope. "So, he can stay?" The officer held up a hand. "Not so fast. Your father's right. Buddy is a wild animal. He may be gentle now, but bears grow large. Their instincts don't just vanish. There are serious legal and safety issues here." "But," the younger officer chimed in, glancing at Buddy, who was now resting his chin on Logan's foot, "there's also no denying the bond between you all. the care, the adjustments you've made. This isn't just a pet situation. The senior officer sighed and continued more gently. We're going to propose a compromise. You'll be allowed to keep Buddy temporarily under strict conditions. Jack straightened. What kind of conditions? You'll need to apply for a special wildlife permit, build a new enclosure that meets habitat standards, no public contact, regular inspections, and you'll have to agree to continue pursuing a long-term wildlife solution, be that a sanctuary or a licensed facility. Jack's mind immediately jumped to logistics, fencing specs, construction permits, cost. He nodded anyway. We'll do it. Logan looked up at the officers, his voice quiet but firm. Thank you. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jack drew up blueprints, applying his engineering skills to design a larger, more natural enclosure that connected the garage to a secure section of their yard. They installed logs, rocks, tunnels, climbing structures, and a bigger pool. Every detail was reviewed with wildlife specialists and submitted to the Conservation Office for approval. Mary Ann, the vet, provided written testimony about Buddy's health and behavior. Other local experts who had witnessed Buddy's interactions vouched for the family's efforts. The permit process was complex and expensive. Jack dipped into savings meant for future renovations, but he never once hesitated. Watching Logan hammer fence posts, roll boulders, and laugh with Buddy made every dollar worth it. They called it the Project Buddy, a team effort between a boy, his dad, and the bear who had unexpectedly become family. By late summer, everything was in place. The new enclosure was approved. The permits were granted. Buddy had a territory of his own, spacious, secure, and full of enrichment. Their lives settled into a new rhythm. Jack went back to work. Logan returned to school. And Buddy thrived. He still watched cartoons with supervision. He still danced in the kitchen. And he still had an uncanny sense of when someone needed comfort. When Jack had a long day, Buddy would nuzzle up beside him. When Logan was stressed over homework, Buddy would drop a ball at his feet, begging for a break. During their monthly check-ins, the conservation officers were consistently amazed. I've never seen anything like it, one said, watching Logan and Buddy roll a giant ball back and forth like it was the most natural game in the world. He's still a bear, no doubt, but there's something different, like he knows he's part of something. One late summer evening, the sky streaked with orange and lavender. Logan sat in the living room, Buddy's massive head resting on his shoulder. Together, they gazed out the window, watching the trees sway in the wind. Jack leaned quietly against the doorway, his heart full. He hadn't known peace like this in years, not since his wife passed. He thought back to that day in the woods. If he'd said no, if they'd walked away, how many of these moments of laughter, of healing, of love would never have happened? Buddy wasn't a pet. He wasn't quite wild either. He was something else, something that existed in the quiet space between fear and trust, instinct and compassion. He was a reminder that family isn't always chosen. Sometimes it finds you.